Hello, and welcome to this special online presentation provided by the Center for College and Career Readiness and our partner organization, the Common Core Institute. My name is Kevin Baird. I serve as chairman, and I'll be your faculty member for today. I would note that the content that we're providing today is usually presented at a half-day seminar. I've cut the content into two parts, but I will give you some hints if you need to pause or otherwise reflect if you're watching this online and not participating, obviously, in a half-day seminar. Today's presentation is about priorities for principals and building teams related to implementing the Common Core and college and career readiness. What you're about to see and hear is based upon our experience over the last year working with more than 2,000 administrators across the United States, as well as late-breaking research. Some of the research that I'm going to talk about is literally only a few weeks old. So today we're going to talk about the big vision and the requirements of the Common Core, and that's going to be part one. And then part two, which is actually a second video, we'll be looking at examples based upon the new assessments and assessment study, and then talking about the priorities for right now. Everything that I present is aligned with the national pathway for implementing the Common Core state standards. That pathway begins with building deep capacity through something that's called the Black Belt Certification Program, ensuring that inside of your buildings you have folks who are as deeply trained as any kind of external consultant. From there, building upon your lead teachers, I call them the pioneers who volunteer, the folks who are really going to take it forward, but in an environment where everyone has awareness. So create awareness for everybody. Everybody has to be on the same page, but build upon that pioneer spirit. Principals are critical. I would tell you that this year, if we do not have our principals well educated, and on board and understanding key, specific, pragmatic things to do, we will not be where we need to be by the time the new assessments roll out in 2014-2015. I will speak to priorities in the areas of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. A reminder that in education we must attack all three areas in tandem at the same time. They do not live in silos: curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And everything must be viewed through the lens of sustainable change. So a reminder, if you haven't heard this before, Reading First was a 3-year program. It cost $6 billion with a B dollars, and state DOEs didn't keep half, so that means it was roughly twice the size as Race to the Top. And after 3 years, the Office of Management and Budget and the General Accounting Office found that we had not really moved the needle as a country. Nothing that we had done was truly sustainable. The reason for that is that the folks especially who implemented in the first year, they actually did the worst. So they had 3 years to do it, but they did the worst. Why did that happen? It happened because the program had become just that, a program. It was death by paper cuts. What we were trying to do was not integrate it into the culture, into the fabric of the school organization itself. The data you're about to see show in a very visceral way that we cannot, as a country, we cannot afford to let that happen again. So we must consider the key critical elements of sustainable change. So I'm going to talk about vision. We don't have a lot of time today, but I want you to understand that the vision is not about standards. The vision is about college and career readiness. I never met a standard that taught a kid ever. There are a lot of papers that indicate that standards don't matter if they're not implemented, and implementation with fidelity is about the vision and the culture of the school. We should be about the business of creating college and career-ready students. Skills. We cannot do that if we proceed from the assumption that our teachers have all of the skills they need. As a matter of fact, you're going to see specifically areas where it's very highly likely our teachers do not have those skills. We must begin here with developing the new skill set for ourselves and for our educators, for our teachers. A new textbook, new materials are not going to cut it. They're not going to solve the problem. It is about the people in front of the students. Incentives. Incentives are important, but I want to make sure that everyone is aware that incentives are not necessarily about money. Incentives can be about actually skill development, getting training, getting certified. All of the certification programs and all of the lessons, programs of study that are offered both at the Common Core Institute and at the broader organization, the Center for College and Career Readiness, all of them carry graduate credits, because getting a graduate credit, actually propelling your career, and in most school districts that actually has implication for pay, is a real incentive for the practitioner. Resources. I'm not going to get on my soapbox here about resources. I just want you to remember that many elements of the Common Core standards in college and career readiness are currently being developed as you listen to this. So your priority assessment clusters in mathematics are relatively new. If your math textbook or your new math program, whatever someone's trying to sell you and they put a sticker on it saying it's aligned to the Common Core in mathematics, you need to ask them if it aligns to those new priority assessment clusters. If it's been developed in the last year, it very likely does not. The same with the new Lexile bands or the new requirements for text complexity, which also have been revised upwards and are new within the last year. That new reading program that someone stuck a sticker on says it's aligned. Ask them, does it align to the new Lexile requirements? At the end of the day, the most important resource is the teacher's brain and the principal's outlook, their voice. And then the plan. I'm telling you today the key priorities, the place to start your plan. I want to note that much of the materials that I'm using today come from the Common Core Black Belt Certification Program, which is the graduate program for leaders in college and career readiness. It's a year-long graduate program. So my thanks to that program for letting me use some of that content. I serve as senior faculty for that program, as do many others. If you are a principal or a leader, I hope you will consider it or other types of graduate training that take you deeply into these topics. Lastly, I want you to be aware that there is funding to help you. You can make contact, get support, grant funding if you email Tim Edwards, tim.edwards@collegecareer.org. He can make sure that you are connected with funding that will help underwrite the various elements that we're speaking about today. So, to begin, I want you to reflect on where you are and where you believe your school or schools are. When it comes to understanding complexity in the Common Core and college and career readiness, that would be complexity of curriculum and instruction. When it comes to understanding the specific measures that you should be looking at right now to know if you're on the right trajectory, and your understanding and your school's understanding, your teacher's understanding of the key critical strategies for instruction, how to provide instruction aligned to college and career readiness and Common Core. Where are you and where are your schools? And then we always like to ask 3 questions that you might have or that you might want to learn about. I'll note that I'm going to give you my email at the end of this presentation. You are more than welcome. If there are questions you have that were not answered, to email me, and myself or other faculty members will help you with those questions. Other people pay us to do that. So where are you on a scale of 0 to 10? 0 is none, you know nothing. 10 is mastery. You feel that you have a graduate level education in those issues. Where are you and where are your schools? Understanding the complexity of content and instruction, the key specific measures you should be looking at, and then the strategies that you should be implementing in instruction right now. And then 3 questions. You might want to pause as you consider that, otherwise I'm just going to keep on going. The next section is really what we call schema or background knowledge, to help us envision what it is our goal is all about. What is college and career readiness? So I want you to consider that today's first grader is going to enter job training or the first year of college in the year 2024. If we look back that same amount of time, that would take us to, say, the year 2000. In the year 2000, Bill Clinton was still president. The iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, they didn't even exist yet. Google wasn't a public company, and according to the National Science Foundation, which indicates that we learn somewhere around 2 million new facts every year about our physical world, we knew 24 million fewer things in science. How can we even really understand what college and career readiness is for that first grader? There's a little picture here at the bottom of your screen. It's a young 2-year-old named Bridger. I like to show a video about Bridger, and you're welcome to find that video, or it's included a link in it in the materials. But if you go to YouTube and you simply search for "a baby works iPad perfectly," you'll see Bridger. A lot of folks get hung up on the technology of that video, but it's really about how quickly our students are learning, not just to use technology, but to acquire vocabulary, to match colors, to understand their words, to learn to read, so much earlier than we ever did, because their ecosystem has changed, the technologies have changed. So I want you to consider as a formative question, what is college and career readiness for a high school senior? And how is that different for an 8th grader, and then for a 5th grader, and then for a kindergarten? What does it mean in your school, in your grades, to create college and career ready students? If you're watching this presentation with a team of folks, you want to pause and consider those. It's very important that we understand our own vision for college and career readiness before we're ready to go on to delve into the Common Core, which gives us specific strategies and specific requirements to achieving college and career readiness. So I hope you'll pause for a moment, discuss with your team, if you're with your team, what is a college and career ready student, and how does college and career readiness change? When we think about a high schooler all the way down to that kindergartner whose world, whose college career readiness world, is very hard to even imagine. What does that mean for your school? I'll go ahead and move forward. The next section is what I call Knowledge 1. It's about the big vision. I'm going to give you some background, some research behind the Common Core. I have a modest proposal to you, and that is that the shifts that we're talking about, the changes for college and career readiness, are so large that there are not enough days for professional development, and there's not enough money to bring all of your teachers to a place where you're going to train them to be successful. That success has to happen from within. So I want you to consider one bad habit that you think your teachers have, or that you have, that your faculty have, one thing you think they need to change to achieve higher, better, more rigorous college and career readiness outcomes. What is that one bad habit, that one priority thing? Because if you think about what it takes to go on a diet, the work that it takes just to change one habit, say stop eating chocolate chips or stop having a beer, whatever it might be, right? Reduce your calories just by 5%. That has to come from within, and you need a lot of support. It's not easy to change just one thing, and we're going to be talking about changing many things. The reality is that right now, 3/4 of the fastest growing occupations require more than what we do in K-12 education, more than a high school diploma, and yet just over half of our citizens actually achieve that level of education. College and career readiness is all about what students need to go out and get a job, to be successful after they leave K-12 education. So, for instance, if we look at the 5 most critical elements, according to our employers, employers expect their students, their new employees, to understand concepts and new developments in science and technology. Everything in the Common Core is all about science and math. The ability to analyze and solve complex problems. Remember, for that kindergartner, we have no idea what those problems are going to be when they get into the workforce. The ability to apply knowledge and skills to real-world settings. Book learning is out. Real world is in. Critical thinking and analytical reasoning skills. So no matter what the problem is, problems that I can't even imagine today, I'm going to be able to reason through them. And then the ability to effectively communicate orally and in writing. You'll notice that nowhere there did it say pass the state test, pass the end of course exams. It isn't about knowing a whole big long list of stuff. It's about being able to do, to analyze, to synthesize, to reason, to think in the real world setting. These are the elements that are at the foundation of the Common Core and college and career readiness. These are important, critical elements for our communities, for our children, real bread and butter pocketbook issues. For instance, consider that the most competitive jobs right now, farming, fishing, and forestry, there are nearly 50 people seeking every one opening in farming, fishing, and forestry. Nearly 30 people for every job opening in construction and extraction. Nearly 16 people in every job opening in building, grounds, cleaning, and maintenance. But there's only one person for every job opening in the life, physical, and social sciences. You're pretty much guaranteed a job. There's less than half an applicant, half a person, for every job opening in computer and mathematical sciences. In the United States, our businesses that are in computer programming and technologies, they can't find enough people to fill those jobs. Imagine the impact on the unemployment rate if we could find those folks. How about healthcare practitioners and technical jobs? There's less than a third of an applicant, less than a third of a person available for every one opening. That's crazy. But these are the reasons why we must change how we teach, what we're doing in the classroom to prepare our students. We are not preparing students for the jobs that are open. As a matter of fact, looking forward, we see the percentage of job openings in management, education, healthcare, computer specialties. This is from the Condition of College and Career Readiness, a report from ACT. And you see the percentage of students who are math proficient, but also interested in those careers. I talk about soul-sucking math classes and soul-sucking science textbooks. We've taken all the interest out of these things. But remember, perhaps you went to school when we first went to the moon, when your family got its first microwave or cable television. Science was very interesting and exciting. A lot of times today, we just take it for granted. The new iPhone comes out and everyone gets it. It's like a new toy. We must be developing interest and proficiency in science, in mathematics. As a matter of fact, I could be concerned about the 41.8% on your screen. Those are the kids that are in purple. 41.8% of 12th graders that are not interested in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and they have low math proficiencies. I could be concerned about that. But actually, I'm really even more concerned about the 27.3% of kids, that would be the green, that are highly math proficient, and they don't want to do science, technology, engineering, or mathematics either. We are killing our students with boring, horrible approaches to science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm going to tell you how to change that specifically. The Common Core tells us what we need to do. The quality of math and science education lags very far behind other nations. We're actually falling to 9th in the proportion of young people get a college degree in science and mathematics. For every 100 bachelor's degrees in the United States, only 19 students get a graduate bachelor's degree in a STEM major. Of those, only 10 are going to go into a STEM career, and after a decade, only 8 will be in a STEM field. I call this slide America as the burger flippers of the world slide. This is what the Common Core college and career readiness is trying to change. These are really big issues. So I'm going to offer to send you this research updated just a little bit ago from ACT. But this is the 2011 data, and it goes to where our kids are today against these higher benchmarks for college and career readiness, okay? Much higher benchmarks than our current state tests. Just 1/2 of our students met the higher benchmarks in reading in 2011, less than half in mathematics. Only 30% of our kids met the higher benchmarks in science, and across all of the benchmarks, those higher benchmarks, college and career readiness benchmarks, and by the way, these are the criteria that are underlying, that are the foundation of the new assessments coming out, so pay attention, it's important. Only 25% of our kids met those benchmarks, were proficient across all 4 elements. I actually have the data for your state, so if you email me, all right, my email is kevin.baird, B-A-I-R-D, kevin.baird@collegecareer.org. I'm going to show you my email a little later, kevin.baird@collegecareer.org. I'll have someone send you this report for your state, how you stack up. Our students are not prepared. If we believe that we're already doing the strategies we need to be doing, we're in big trouble because we're not cutting the grade right now. And I'm not talking about proficiency on our state exams. I'm talking about college and career readiness benchmarks. As a matter of fact, in 2006, Dr. Schmeiser did a study that was funded by the folks at ACT. And she asked this question: what are the key drivers of later success, that is success in the 10th and 11th grade, for students who are being measured against these higher benchmarks, college and career readiness benchmarks in science and math? And what Schmeiser found is that if I am not prepared to read the kind of complex text that I read in science, I have no chance, 1% is standard error, I have almost no chance of meeting the college and career readiness benchmarks. I have very little chance in math. But when I think about preparation and reading, I'm not talking about Romeo and Juliet. I'm not talking about Chaucer. I'm talking about complex nonfiction informational text. And you'll notice if I focus on this one issue, the results are exponential. That's why in math, in the Common Core, in many ways, mathematics is treated simply as nonfiction informational text, as well as a specific skill set for understanding that text and solving problems in it. So, everything that we're going to talk about is about science and mathematics, and getting there by looking at increasing comprehension for complex text. Unfortunately, the text in the United States and our curricula has gone down. And you know, we do have a national curricula. If you look at the primary textbook providers, you know who they are. They control more than, 90% of everything we can buy. But the complexity in those textbooks has actually decreased over the last 100 years. On your screen is the outcome of a study provided by Metametrics, where they look at that text complexity based on Lexile. It isn't our teachers that are failing us, it's our content, it's our curriculum. And this has led to what we call the text gap. I want you to commit this to memory if there's any slide that you see, because it speaks to our measurable outcomes, our measurable goals. On the bottom is the average text complexity of the average K-12 curriculum today, bottom line. The top line is where we have to get. That would be our stretch curriculum, like International Baccalaureate Advanced Placement, and a trajectory towards college and career readiness. On the right-hand side, you'll see the range of the text that we have to master to, for instance, gain entrance into the military service. The majority of America's kids today are not eligible for participation in military service because they can't pass the test. The citizenship exam, workplace training. At the bottom of that workplace training graph, you would think about, say, Kohl's department stores or something like that. At the top, you would have not just science and technology type careers or workplace training, but also, think about it, folks who are going to go into become an electrician or plumbing, steam fitting, auto mechanics. Remember that our kids who are going into trades actually have to read text that's much harder, much more complex, much more domain specific than our kids who are going to a first year of college, even at Harvard or at Yale. So this defines the shift in text complexity, our ability to read. We have to go from that lower bar to the higher bar. The big vision then, in summary, is not about standards. Standards don't teach kids. It's about college and career readiness and achieving our ability against those new higher benchmarks in science and mathematics. And we're going to get there. We're going to get there by closing that gap in content and comprehension, by having more complexity in our classroom. That's the key. That's the big vision. Going back to, what is college and career readiness for your students? I want you to reflect upon that again, this little bit of information that I gave you, because it is measurable. You can measure where your students are right now today. You can measure if they are on the road to college and career readiness using this graph, this data right here, using Lexile. Now, you might want to pause here for a moment. We're going to go into our next section, which are the requirements for Common Core standards. This is the last section of this video. In our second video, we're then going to build on those requirements by studying examples from the new assessments and then looking at priorities. So, Knowledge 1, the requirements of the Common Core. The Common Core standards have to be viewed through this lens of sustainable change. So, for each element, for each requirement that I present to you, I want you to consider what's your vision around the implementation of that requirement. Do your teachers have those skills? Are they incented to really master the ability to do whatever that requirement is? What are the resources that you have now or that you might need? How does it fit into your plan? Let's talk about English Language Arts, and I would note that every single thing I'm talking about with English Language Arts applies to Science and Social Studies. On the new assessment, up to, say, 85%, a majority of the prompts that you're going to see on the new assessments are going to come from Science and Social Studies in English Language Arts, and I'll give you examples of those. So we talked about complexity. You saw that graph. I just showed you how to measure college and career readiness, where we are today, where we need to go. Well, this slide, by the way, is a very good example of how the things that you have are definitely, very likely, not updated, because the information that I'm going to show you right now has been updated since I made this slide. So if you want the updated Lexile levels, you can email me. We do cover the updates. They aren't huge, but I just want to note that it is a good example of when I made this slide, not all that long ago, that the information here was absolutely spot on. They have since been revised, okay? Nevertheless, on the left-hand side of your screen, you have the current on-grade level typical text measures. So for instance, in the 4th and 5th grade, an on-grade level reader would be reading text between a 640 Lexile and an 850 Lexile. If you don't know what a Lexile is, you can Google it, you can look it up. You can go to lexile.com, that's Lexile.com, or you can simply note that Lexile is the only vertical method of measurement that takes us completely through P20. It was originally funded and developed by the U.S. government, and it allows me on a vertical scale to see both the complexity of my texts, how complex they are, and also the reading ability of the student on that same scale, and I can measure apples to apples across the grades. Really critical. So an on-grade level reader today in the 4th to 5th grade will be reading between a 640 Lexile and an 850 Lexile. That's on the left. On the right, text complexity grade bands associated with the Common Core. 4th to 5th grade, 770 to 980 Lexile. Just compare 4th to 5th grade. By the 4th grade, I want my students coming in under the Common Core reading at a 770 Lexile. Well, if I go to the left-hand side of my screen, 770 Lexile is somewhere toward the end of the 4th grade, beginning of 5th grade. I need to accelerate the ability of my students to read. I need to be providing them with materials that are much more complex by a grade level when it comes to the 4th grade. Okay, I want them by the beginning of 4th grade to read by about where most kids, if they're on grade level, get by the end of the 4th grade. But look at 5th grade. By the end of 5th grade, I need to accelerate my students' ability to read, and I need to be providing them with complex text at around a 980 Lexile by the end of the 5th grade. Where's the 980 Lexile on the left? Look on the left. 980 Lexile is somewhere around end of 7th, early 8th grade. That would be a 2 to 3 grade level shift. This has implications for your libraries, the materials in your libraries, making sure that the things that are in middle school libraries, some of those are shared down to elementary school. But it also has implications for the classroom. Our on-grade level readers today are not students whom we often believe need to have increased reading acceleration. But those students who are on grade level are actually 2 to 3 grade levels behind. They require the same kind of acceleration, remediation, intervention, specific strategies that our students do that today would be in a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 intervention. So your special education teachers, they become a consultant to your entire school. By the way, one of the good ways to measure what's happening with Lexile is have your media specialist also act as a consultant to your school, because through their Destiny software or whatever kind of software you have to check out books in the library, they should be able to tell you the Lexile level of the content that's circulating in your school, at which grade level. This is a huge shift, and this is where we begin. This speaks directly to that slide I showed you with the Schmeiser study that says that my chance of meeting the higher benchmarks, those benchmarks that are underneath those new assessments that are coming, my chance is almost nothing in science and very small in mathematics if I do not increase my ability to read very complex text. This is how my text has to increase. I want to get to somewhere between a 1,300 and 1,500 Lexile reading level by the end of 12th grade. And they shift, by the way, all throughout. Let's move forward then. There's a report. I'm more than happy to send the report to you, a copy of it from the ACT, where it's a first look at college and career readiness, and they essentially forecast how we would do today if our kids were given the assessments, if they were implementing the Common Core in college and career readiness. And here's the upshot. 2/3 of our kids would fail. Imagine that headline. 2/3 of your community students are not college and career ready. And at the core finding, it is that our students cannot read complex text. They can't read it. They can't understand it. If you're African American, it will be 90% of our students would be expected to fail. 80% of Hispanic students. So text complexity is the key. It is the heart. As a matter of fact, it's the heart in reading and also the heart in mathematics. I want to give you a sense of how we rank up when we think about other countries, other folks who are applying for those international jobs or even for jobs in the United States. Now, some folks don't like these slides because they'll say, you know, Kevin, I'm not interested in other countries. If that's you, if you're not interested in other countries, then simply look at these slides as the degree of shift that has to happen in your classrooms. The U.S. College and Career Readiness Benchmark, the new benchmarks, right, that are reflected on the new assessments that are coming, actually has us just trying to tie for 5th in the world. We're trying to tie Canada, okay? Let's just tie Canada. If you look at the kids who take the international test called the PISA, which is aligned to the NAEP, which is and of course the Common Core is aligned to the NAEP. The students, for instance, in Shanghai, they're from a pretty narrow socioeconomic status who take the test. So we're not interested really in beating them. In Finland and other Scandinavian countries, you have fairly homogeneous countries. So we're really looking at kind of tying for 5th. Well, if you find the U.S. today, if you look down, U.S. today falls between Iceland and Liechtenstein in terms of our ability to read. So the space that we have to traverse to get to that new benchmark, it is not complete rocket science. As a matter of fact, everything in reading, and this is good news, everything in reading in the English language arts you can start doing today right now. Pragmatically, you can start it right now. But math is a different story. In mathematics, the United States today falls between Luxembourg and Ireland, right at below. This is actually 2009 mathematics. So if you look at the most recent data, it has not changed, I'm sorry to say. And again, we're really just trying to get to 5th with those new college and career readiness benchmarks. But I want you to understand that what we have to do in math is a very significantly greater shift than what we have to do in reading. So when you think back to your vision in mathematics, the skills of your teachers, the resources they have, this is a very, very significant shift, much more so than English language arts. So where do we start? In English language arts, we start with what are called the anchor standards for reading. They are the same across grades K-12. According to the assessment consortia, there are 2 of these that are prevalent across everything that you're going to see on the assessments. And according to the authors of the Common Core, the very first anchor standard is really one of the most important. Okay? So according to the folks at the assessment consortia and the authors, standard number 1 and standard number 10 are really the key. So look at standard number 1. Read closely. If you go through black belt graduate training, you will learn how to create close reading lessons and assessments. It isn't what you think it is. It's very, very significant. Imagine teaching 3 paragraphs over 3 days. That would be an exemplar lesson for Gettysburg Address. Read closely to determine what the text says explicitly, precisely. Use logical inferences from the text, make logical inferences. That's about critical thinking. Cite specific textual evidence. That's about precision and accuracy and understanding in the text to support your conclusions that you're drawing from the text. That's about critical thinking. That's about argument. This is the key #1 element in English language arts, also, by the way, in science and social studies and the literacies. And if you look at then the rest of the anchor standards, 2 through 9, they're very similar, right? Analyze how and why, interpret words and phrases, assess point of view, integrate and evaluate content. It's really about critical thinking and the use of that text with precision. By the time I get to the last anchor standard, #10, read and comprehend complex literary and informational text. Independently, independence is key, and proficiency. So #1 and #10 are where you must start, all right? Complex text that I'm reading closely, I'm thinking critically about, I'm being very precise about, I'm using evidence, and I am supporting my conclusions, creating arguments when I'm writing and speaking. So this is an example of a kind of assessment question. This would be a computer-aided question, somewhere around 3rd grade, where I'd be looking at the Utah ecosystem shown, and I would be asking to sort the organisms in the ecosystem into 3 groups: producers, consumers, and decomposers. A few things about this example. You'll notice I have a picture. Write down picture prompts. Picture prompts are absolutely a great strategy to use in your classroom. You could start it today. You could start it across the curriculum using picture prompts to draw, to infer what's going on. Also, look at my word bank. These words are from science. This is a science prompt. Integrating more science and social studies content across the curriculum, including in English language arts. And I'm not asking the student to define the words. I'm not giving them a spelling list. I'm asking them to use these words and these concepts as they look at the interrelationships, the higher order critical thinking. I'm going to give you a few other examples. These are from the assessment examples from the consortia, from their content frameworks. So for example, at grade 3, students might listen. Listen alone. You should note that on the PARCC assessment, there's one entire assessment of the 5 assessments that is wholly focused on speaking and listening. Speaking and listening will be integrated throughout the Smarter Balanced assessments, okay? So I'm going to listen alone. So the ability, sometimes in the lower grades, I think I'm not teaching a student if I'm not having them read something, but that's not true. Listening closely and then speaking is key. I'm going to listen to that animated cartoon character talking about saving energy in the home. This is about science. Again, another science prompt. You know that we do not adequately teach science in grades K-5. Integrating science content is critical. The student is then going to respond to a series of short answer comprehension questions and then move on to something that's a little bit more higher order, like analyzing or integrating information, maybe doing a graphic organizer. These are other key strategies. Start out with comprehension type questions, things that are a little bit easier, and then move forward to things that are more complex. Using graphic organizers is great. Here's another example. Grades 3 to 5, I might read or view. View would mean video, right? And discuss a short informational article. There's information again about science topic like static electricity. Middle and high school example, students might be viewing, again, historical or political media messages. They're social studies. And then I'm summarizing, I'm detecting bias. That gets to argument and evidence and identifying different points of view or common themes. Another example, in social studies, I might have a social studies prompt where my elementary students are reading and discussing one kind of content, which would be a first-hand account, okay, letters of immigrant children, and then an article, a second-hand account. Reading multiple kinds of sources, reading multiple items, and then responding to questions is a key thing you're going to see on the assessment. It's something you should be doing inside of your curriculum today. Don't just read one thing, read multiple things. That's also a strategy for students who are behind. I can read things that are easier and things that are on level and things that are harder, and that helps the student make sense of the content. For English language learners, I could even have them read content in their first language. And then I'm responding to a research question, okay? Comparison or integrating information, again, those highest levels of critical thinking. Everything in the Common Core is around a progressive depth of knowledge. You need to understand depth of knowledge because the assessments are at a depth of knowledge. The Assessment Consortium have adopted Webb's depth of knowledge, where there are 4 levels. You can actually, though, compare those to Bloom's taxonomy. In the end of the day, there are things we need to know, there are things that we need to think, reason, apply, and then there are things that we need to be able to do with that content, okay? Things we need to be able to make. We need to be actively teaching at all of these levels. Under No Child Left Behind, we've been very focused on the know, on memorizing, on that really long list of all the stuff that we're going to be assessed on. But what we know after more than a decade of No Child Left Behind is that just by having long lists of stuff to know, our students do not learn. They are not adequately able to apply, to think through, to reason, and to make new kinds of items. So in your classroom, you should always see know, think, and do. It's an easy way of thinking about Webb's depth of knowledge. So, requirements. I'm not going to go deeply into each of these. We don't have time today. But I want you to understand them. I want you to understand that they exist, and I want to understand that you could measure them today. I can teach you ways to measure them today. Nonfiction informational text, that gets to complexity. It gets back to being able to do well in science and mathematics. 1/2 of everything a student reads by 4th grade should be nonfiction informational text. 55% by 8th grade. By 12th grade, 70% of everything should be nonfiction informational text. Not sure how to do that? A real easy strategy is to take all of your current literature, whatever it is you're teaching, and to pair it with a piece of nonfiction, especially current events. As a matter of fact, current events is a really great way to increase complexity in the classroom. If you look here in the middle of your screen, the average Lexile for newspapers, Reuters, New York Times, Washington Post, the average Lexile level for that content is very significantly higher. There are other kinds of nonfiction magazines, current events, National Geographic Kids, Ranger Rick, Discovery Magazine, but you can link them. You can pair that content with a piece of literature. So for instance, let's say I am reading Beatrix Potter and the Peter Cottontail stories. I could, for instance, match those stories with a piece of nonfiction informational text about rabbits. That would increase the complexity, bring the Lexile up, increase the complexity of text in my classroom. But it isn't enough just to have nonfiction in the classroom. The standards require critical thinking. Remember, know, think, do. I have to be able to think through that content, understand it with precision, think through it, and do new things with it. We get at that through writing. Writing is one of the critical kinds of products that we create, one of the key ways that we show that we can actually reason through. Now, one of the ways that we do that, that we show that, we create those products, is by a particular kind of writing. So the writing requirements in the Common Core are aligned to the NAEP. In the second video in this series, the second part of our session today, we're going to talk about the brand new, just out research and results from the 2011 NAEP, which was given on the computer, by the way, like the new assessments will be for the Common Core. But essentially focus on persuasive writing. 40% of everything that I write should be persuasive writing, and always think about the use of evidence and argument in my writing, the use of evidence and precision. Even in narrative, the use of evidence and very precise, specific details. Writing is key. The link between complex text and writing is really about text-dependent questions, driving the student through the use of questioning techniques in the classroom, in my prompts, in my assignments, so that they have to really read and understand the text. According to David Coleman, he did a study. He found that somewhere around 80% of all the questions we ask in classrooms do not require students to have read the text closely in order to answer. One of the things I like to say is rigor is in the third question, not the first or second question. You can have the same crappy curriculum that you've always had, but if you are doing better questioning by your teachers, this skill is critical. You will drive students to learn more of that current curriculum that's in the classroom. So text-dependent questions. that also helps students get at new requirements for vocabulary. The thing about vocabulary is that when you consider how we learn vocabulary, like this list, you're looking at it thinking it says it's kindergarten essential vocabulary. It's, by the way, from the Assessment Consortia. And it says, for instance, hexagon or vertices or dimensional under math. How do our students learn those words? Well, they hear them. So this isn't so much a vocabulary list for your students in kindergarten to be spelling. It isn't a spelling list. This is a list of words that your teachers should be saying all the way up into high school, speaking in the domain of what they're teaching. So I just want you to consider that. You know, what is college and career readiness? What's the implication for your classrooms? When were you in a classroom the last time and you heard the phrase take away, like 10 take away 5? Instead of the word subtraction. We must be much more precise, much more accurate in our own vocabulary, and our students can learn. Our students will learn any kind of vocabulary we teach them. Think about the vocabulary in Dr. Seuss. How many of our kindergartners know the vocabulary in Dr. Seuss or in games like Bakugan? They learn it because they have experience with it. They've heard it a million times. If we use this vocabulary out loud everywhere, our students can learn it. By the way, the vocabulary you see here is taken from the assessments. There are complete lists of vocabulary, especially in mathematics. I can get those to you. Our black belts learn those as part of the black belt certification program, that graduate study. That's English language arts. I will summarize in a little bit, but essentially you're thinking about nonfiction text, you're thinking about writing, you're thinking about special kinds of writing using evidence and argument, and the key linkage there are text-dependent questions, questions that get at higher order thinking skills, the use of vocabulary. So let's now cover mathematics, big shifts. In mathematics, just like in English language arts, how I had those anchor standards, I have the standards for mathematical practice. And here, again, number one is really number one for a reason. Math is all about problems, but there are different kinds of problems than you're used to. You'll see that in the second part of our session today. In mathematics, it's all about real-world problems, text-based problems, problems that I have to persevere in solving. Math is all about creating arguments and using mathematical evidence. The ability to reason abstractly, to take something that's written in English and to then decode it, to translate it into the language of mathematics and then back again into English. Modeling, using real-world examples, solving real-world problems. Using appropriate tools, I suggest to everyone that you go to nctm.org, right on their homepage, nctm.org. You can download new tools for mathematics, being very specific, attending to precision. So for instance, thinking about money. In money under the Common Core, money is actually moved up to second grade in the standards, content shift, okay? So you've seen questions like this, what's the value of the coins, or what's the total value, a little addition, or now a little subtraction, or if an item costs 50 cents, how much more money would you need? But consider what that problem looks like in the Common Core. It says here, your mother sends you to the store to buy something she wants. She tells you that the item costs somewhere between 1 cent and 99 cents. You have only pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters in the money jar. What's the least number of coins you can take with you to make change without going over $1? You can't solve this problem if you cannot read the text. So that's the first most important thing to understanding, that the key to success in mathematics is the ability to read. As a matter of fact, after the 4th grade assessment, it is highly likely that we will see very few just computational questions. Most of the questions will become questions like this, where I have to read. But it isn't just reading, it's reading with precision. It's asking the question, what is the problem trying to get me to figure out? And then paraphrasing it, putting it in my own words, then solving it, putting in the language of mathematics, all right? Very specific, precisely. So I'd be interested in seeing if you can answer this question, all right? There are actually several potential answers that someone might want to argue here, but at the end of the day, what you're looking for is you're looking for the least number of coins that you could take with you to make the maximum amount of change, which would be 99 cents in change. So the least number of coins to make 99 cents. This is an example from a website. It's called the Survey of Enacted Curriculum. It's free. You have a link to it at the end of the presentation, end of the second video. It's from the authors of the standards, the Council of Chief State School Officers, and what it shows is it shows where you should be focusing your instructional time in your classrooms, in math and in English language arts. You can also compare for many states your current state standards and the Common Core standards. If it's a dark square, that's a lot of instruction. A white square, don't teach it, it doesn't matter. And you can see here there are 5 blocks. There are 5 squares, and those squares are level of critical thinking or level of cognitive demand. So you can see in kindergarten, my first three squares for number sense are dark. That means that's where the majority of that instructional time should be. But it isn't just the first square, which is memorizing facts and definitions and formulas. It's all the way up to being able to demonstrate my understanding. However, in kindergarten, when I get into geometrical concepts, I should be going beyond. I should even be solving non-routine problems and making connections, that highest order of critical thinking. So this is a free website. You'll get the link. You can think about implementing the Common Core in terms of the percentage of instructional time specifically at key skills, but not just the skills, the level of cognitive demand for those skills. Now, some of you have been deconstructing the standards. I'm begging you, stop deconstructing the standards. You can get the deconstructed standards. The state of Kentucky deconstructed the standards. You can search for those. There are other states that have free examples of them. They also are available, not very expensive, for your entire school in a searchable PDF. You do not have to spend the time deconstructing them. And by the way, there's a really interesting white paper out. It was out from Kansas, the Kansas Department of Ed, which says danger with deconstruction, because you could simply create a new checklist, and that's not what you want to do. But if you want your teachers to have some way to understand the standards better, you can buy the deconstruction or go out and search for it. I'm going to give you a resource as well at the end of the presentation that's free, that allows you to understand the standards specifically by looking at the progressions of the standards. In mathematics, there is a big shift in content in mathematics. Math is all about, in the Common Core, focusing on the basics, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, so I really understand them. So that then when I get into grades 3, 4, and 5, I can really work with fractions so that I can master fractions. So that when I get into middle school, I'm ready for pre-algebra. 1/3, roughly, of the algebra that happens in the Common Core happens in 8th grade. So that in high school, I'm focused on algebra and geometry all the way up into trigonometry. But it's all about algebra. So there's a lot of math that the Common Core asks us to get rid of. Content shifts. Get rid of it. Don't teach it. Teach instead, go deeper into the basics in K1 and 2, and then the fractions in grades 3, 4, and 5. Those basics are called the fluency, the math fluencies. They are indicated in the standards. If you get the deconstructed standards, you can search for the fluency standards. They are your priority. Think about what is college and career readiness for your school, for your classrooms. You should be teaching math fluencies as often as possible, as early as possible. This is your focus area. So again, caution. Deconstruction shouldn't result in a checklist. It's just one lens to be used with tools like that free website, that Survey of Enacted Curriculum, that tells you where to focus your instructional time, or with tools like the fluencies, where to focus your instructional time. Okay? So, what are the areas of intensity for your grade? You can look at the Survey of Enacted Curriculum and see that specifically. Use these tools. You're going to get a link to this website. You can see, and by the way, you'll notice that for instance, kindergarten through 3rd grade, there aren't a whole lot of areas, right? I'm focusing on specific areas. By the way, on the website, you can drill down into a finer look that talks about some of the specific skills. I would also note that both the PARCC Assessment Consortia and the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortia have published assessment priorities in mathematics. They are assessing by cluster. We teach these in the graduate certification courses. You're going to want to know them and understand them, and they are linked especially and specifically to those fluencies, to the key critical elements. You can see them on those free websites. So for mathematics, mathematics begins and ends with problems. The problem I select in the classroom, the questions I ask in the problem, the way I teach. Okay? So, a problem. Just as an example, in the United States, I might say, which fraction is closer to 1, 4/5 or 5/4? But in the Common Core, I would be teaching the question differently. Which number is closer to 1, 4/5 or 5/4? Use a number line. Explain why this is so. All right? By the way, the answer here is 4/5. The thing is the use of the number line, just like in English Language Arts, the use of the picture prompt, using physical representation, and then the last part of this question, explain why this is so. Using mathematical evidence, defend your position. So in summary, you want to use complex nonfiction text. You can pair it up with your literature. The strategy for ensuring your students understand that text are text-dependent questions and critical thinking questions. You want to make sure that you're integrating evidence and argument across the curriculum with precision, and that your teachers are using spoken vocabulary that's integrated, not just a spelling list. In mathematics, those things are also true. Remember, the type of math problem should be a complex text problem focusing on the mathematical fluencies and, again, critical thinking, those kinds of questions that I ask in math vocabulary. So, I'm going to end the first part of our presentation today. I want you to ask, what does an English language art or a social studies or a science classroom look like for you for college and career readiness based on these shifts? What kind of text are you using? If your 5th graders need to be reading where your 7th and 8th graders are, what does that mean for your library? How does math instruction look different? What kind of problems are you choosing for math instruction, right? Those heavy text-dependent problems. And how do you measure this? You could, right now, today, be measuring for every student their progress toward Common Core. You could have a forecast of knowing where they're going to be, because it all comes down to that text complexity. Please reflect on this information. Think about what is college and career readiness for you. This is my email, kevin.baird@collegecareer.org. I would also note that you have Tim Edwards at collegecareer.org if you're interested in the grant funding. We're going to go now to the second video, so you can split this up, where we're going to look at examples of the new assessment questions to learn through there what the implications are, and then our key critical priorities for this coming year. Thank you so much for joining me. See you whenever you get to that second part of the presentation. Take care.